Hello, everybody, and nice to be with you again for the third part of topic number 9, facilitation. The learning objectives of this particular topic are the purposes of facilitation, the principles of facilitation, what to watch out for, planning a facilitation session, which we dealt with in the last unit, and managing conflict, which we're going to deal with in this particular presentation. And this is about managing conflict in a group. Is the focus today. So thinking about conflict in groups, and I suppose one of the really important things to know is that when you're involved in facilitation, you may be coming into a conflicted situation. Now, it may not necessarily be your job to resolve that conflict if it's an organizational conflict, unless you were specifically brought in and to use the facilitation process to try to do that. But what you do want to try to make sure is that the conflict that may be in the organization isn't reflected in the group or in the group processes that you're engaging with. Conflict can arise from lots of different circumstances. It can just be maybe a few interpersonal situations within an organization, or sometimes it can become endemic within an organization and it can almost become part of the organizational culture. And you can get established conflicts between different parts of an organization, which almost become part of how they see themselves. They see themselves as being against A, B, or C within that particular organization. Not a healthy place to be for any organization, but sometimes you may come up against that. And of course, conflict in group sessions can just reflect sometimes the ongoing conflict within the organization, or it can actually emerge through the session itself. Usually, if there's a very collaborative approach within an organization, it won't result in conflict, even if there's disagreement, but it may. I'd just like to distinguish here between conflict and disagreement. I mean, you're always going to have disagreement. Disagreement between individuals and within groups is just inevitable. And in many ways, it's a positive thing because creativity and finding new solutions comes out of disagreement, especially a positive disagreement where people hear the other person, perhaps take some learnings on board from their disagreement and improve the outcome for everybody as a result. But conflict is a different thing. And the defining thing about disagreement as opposed to conflict is that both sides talk positively to each other. It's a respectful interchange. They talk and listen. They communicate. And because that discussion, that dialogue is going on, they can seek a resolution and find a positive outcome. So the fundamental point there at the very end of that little paragraph is disagreement seeks a resolution. When we're disagreeing, we want to resolve the disagreement. Conflict, on the other hand, doesn't involve dialogue. It doesn't involve communication. People make assumptions. They define the other person as bad or evil or, having other negative characteristics. Their feelings towards the other people are negative and strongly felt. And they compete for the airspace. They compete to talk, not to listen, but they compete to talk, and they compete by talking loudly, talking over each other, yelling, making accusations, and so on. There's no negotiation in conflict. Whereas disagreement seeks a resolution that works for everybody, conflict only seems to win. And in that context, conflict is destructive. This is one model, Thomas Kilman, who talks about conflict modes. And on the left-hand axis there, you have the idea of assertiveness, which focuses on needs, outcomes, and a desired agenda. And on the horizontal axis, you have the idea of cooperativeness, which is focusing on the other's needs and on mutual relationships. So it's this kind of, within this model of assertiveness and cooperativeness, where do the various different conflict modes lie? So in a place of low assertiveness and low cooperativeness, you have avoidance. This is where people withdraw from the situation. They may leave the organization. They kind of maintain a neutrality. They focus just on their own tasks. And it reduces the culture of creativity and the energy within an organization when that happens. In where there's high assertiveness and low cooperativeness, you get competition. And this is where there's zero-sum orientation. That's back to my point about conflict. It's about winning. Winning or losing is the focus there. And it's not taking any account of the other's needs. Compromising is kind of in the middle. It has medium levels both of assertiveness and cooperativeness. It's kind of trying to find things that everybody will be happy with. It tries to keep relationships good, keep them positive, keep them undamaged. And that's often where we end up. I suppose the slightly negative part of that is that you can end up with compromises not really meeting the needs of anybody, and also compromises not necessarily meeting the best needs of the organization, because the chances are that the compromise, which is aimed at the best minimum for everybody, is probably not the best for the organization. The most positive outcome is collaboration. This is where everybody is conscious of the needs of the other and conscious of their own needs, and is working in a positive and creative way, looking for a variety of different options, looking creatively for outcomes that are really beneficial for everybody. And that is a very positive response and requires particular type of culture within an organization and requires a particular type of people. And then the final one is the accommodating approach. And that is kind of the opposite, the diagonal opposite of competing, where one of the parties only takes account of the needs of the other effectively and accedes to their requests, gives in to what they want, and maintains the harmony through that. But again, perhaps not the best for the organization, in that unless it may be in certain circumstances, but again, that kind of creativity that comes from disagreement, well managed, is lost, and you're just getting one side winning, but one side winning in a positive way or without rancor, whereas in the competing, one side wins, but with a lot of bad feeling and bad blood. So these are just that whole idea of assertiveness and cooperativeness as being two of the defining elements of conflict, and the modes of conflict is an interesting one. So there can be lots of different sources of conflict in an organization. I mean, it can be just misunderstanding sometimes, pure communication. There can be personal differences, just people who think differently about things and have different value systems and so on. There can be an information deficiency where there's just not enough information being shared within the organization. Goal differences, that can be something real, and in a way that's something that needs to be addressed by the organization, so that there is a commonality of goals amongst its those working on its behalf. There can be, if there's uncertain roles, if it isn't clear whose job something is, or whose responsibility something is, or who has the authority to decide certain things, that can certainly give rise to conflict, as people try to either not take decisions that are needed, or take decisions that are not really within their remit. Where people feel that their status is being threatened, that can give rise to conflict as well. So reorganization, people being promoted over other people in a way that that threatens the status of Lack of trust within an organization, that can be a very insidious kind of a thing. As the organization goes there, then even good things get interpreted badly. Bad motives are imputed to people. There isn't that kind of giving people the benefit of the doubt approach, which is really necessary within any organization. Organization is under pressure. Conflict can arise because people feel under pressure themselves, and they feel threatened, and they feel scared and nervous, and that can certainly give rise to conflict as well. And as I said, organizational change. Conflict can come from lots of different sources, and I suppose in addressing conflict within an organization, one of the key first conflict actually is. But I suppose we're more thinking facilitation meetings in particular, and I suppose within a meeting context there are two sources of conflicts. One is real professional differences, and that is, where there are real differences in professional opinions. I suppose this can particularly arise when you have different professions within an organization who look at things from a different perspective. And unless there's a very strong, I suppose, leadership within the organization, which brings the different perspectives together and makes the different perspectives see the other's point of view, then there can be conflict situations arising, which are genuine, if you want to call it that, in that they are reflective of the different backgrounds, the different orientations, and the different professional frameworks, I suppose, within which people are operating. And this conflict can definitely arise if major decisions are being made, strategic approaches are being taken, and particularly if a decision is seen as being irreversible, so that once we go down this particular path, we won't be able to come back from it. But of course, the conflict can also arise from power struggles and personalities issues, and this is, I suppose, a less healthy form of conflict. Conflict is never great, but at least you can see the reason for the ones where it's arising from professional differences. But where the conflicts are more about personalities, and just that people don't like each other, or that they feel threatened by one another, or and they just, as they say, don't get on, then that is a more difficult issue to deal with. And even good leadership in that circumstance will find it hard to deal with these kinds of conflicts. There's just one spot, I'm throwing this in here as something not to go through in too much detail here, but for something for you to be aware of. A person called Meredith Belbin identified 9 roles that people play in teams and the different personalities that go with them. And sometimes the conflicts that arise, or the disagreements that arise, are because people are actually more likely within a group to be occupying or playing a particular role. Some of them are creative, some of them are very detailed, looking at the fine detail, how things might be implemented, and because different people are looking kind of get into disagreement and into conflict about how the issue should be addressed. Helping to address this is actually to do a Belbin team role exercise, which actually identify what their role or roles are within the team with that, and everybody else does that as well. And one of the big advantages of this is the provide within the organization and general goodwill within the area. When people understand where other behaving in a particular way, and that it's nothing personal, and that it's just them acting out the role that they play within the team. People's understanding of the team, understanding of how the team is operating, and help them to, and actually assign them activities and functions that are in line. It's something that you can look up yourselves, but it's an interesting. And finally, really just talking about managing conflict in meetings. How do you do that? And I know we said this in the last presentation as well. Be prepared, plan. Likely to arise, and you can maybe suss that out in advance of any meeting. And is it likely to have the seeds of conflict? If decisions are being made, if a particular route is being chosen over another, that can give rise, that more likely to bear the seeds of conflict than if other types of decisions are being made. One's more high level in nature, which will need more work in practice. And then one of the important things, if you can do this, is to agree the rules. And things like people raising their hand to speak, one speaker at a time, point of view, no personal comments, an agreement that they and defer a topic because they just can't come to a conclusion. Approaches can help to keep the meeting under control, and they are things that the facilitator can refer to and say, look, we agreed we would operate in this way, so I don't think this type of behavior is actually keeping to those rules. Try to clarify the real causes of the conflict as well. Try and see where is it coming from. Seek consensus. That's your job in these kind of circumstances, is to try to seek consensus, try and get an outcome, whether it is a compromise or whatever it is, but at least consensus, so that something that the majority of the people go along with, while taking account of the concerns of the others. But it's important that you don't take sides. That's not your role as a facilitator, and it certainly will damage the whole process if you are seeing as being on one side or the other. And I suppose the other thing, which is just from a very practical point of view, try and make sure that there are breaks. If things are getting a little heated, you can always have a break. You can always have an unscheduled break and say, right, we'll just take 5 minutes just to, comfort break or whatever you want to call it. So that's another thing that's worth thinking about. And finally, here's just another few resources for you to consider. There's a few presentations there and a few YouTube videos that you can look at, and some on conflict management and some on the causes of conflict. And I hope you do that. And I hope this was of some use to you.